Hi everyone, thanks for joining me today. I'm going to be showing you some of the basics of knitting. So this is the way I learned to knit, and I honestly think that it's the easiest and fastest method of knitting, so I'm just going to show you guys different techniques and how to get started. If you're a total beginner, this is probably a good place to start. So for knitting, you're going to need some needles. I prefer straight needles, especially if you're a beginner. I think they're a little bit easier to learn on in my personal experience. And so grab some knitting needles, and we're going to need some yarn. So I'm using a 6.5mm knitting needle and just some bulky yarn to practice this swatch. So the first thing you're going to want to do is your cast on. So this type of cast on is called a long tail cast on. So we have our ball of yarn here, and then as the name implies, we're going to pull a long tail. So I have the tail here, I'm going to pull a long tail. I usually do like twice the length or so of the project that I'm making. So I'm just doing a small swatch. I'm going to grab about 30 centimeters of tail, and then going to get started. So you're going to take one needle and your long tail, and then you're going to put the needle through the yarn just like this. Then what I like to do is twist this so that this piece here is just twisted. So I've just put the yarn through and then I give it a twist. Okay, and now for the bottom part, what I do is I kind of like to grab it in my palm here, and then I split it with my thumb and index finger, and then this should be twisted across the needle. So we haven't done anything too stressful yet. Let me just come in here and show you guys what I mean. See, twisted behind the needle like that. Okay, so now we've twisted the yarn, holding it open. So we have one piece of yarn spread over our thumb, one piece spread over our index finger. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the needle, come beneath the thumb, grab this yarn and pull up. And then we're going to travel back to the index finger. You can kind of rotate your hand, go over that yarn, scoop it, and then we're going to twist again and pull through, like so. That one slipped a little bit. So once again, there's the yarn under your thumb. So we're going to come down for this one, scoop it up, twist, grab this yarn here above the index finger, and come back through this loop here. And I always like to hold these stitches with my thumb, and then you want to pull it closed. Just be careful when you're pulling that you're not pulling them so tight that you're not going to be able to get into them after. So I'll just do these a couple more, and I'm going to make my swatch just, I think, 10 stitches. So I'll do that again, holding the yarn, holding these stitches here, sorry, under on the thumb, twist, grab the yarn on the index finger, and pull it back through this hole. Nice and easy, like that. And then as you go, you may need to, like I always need to change up and re-grab the yarn, which is totally fine. Helps to maintain the same sort of tension in the cast on. So I have 10 stitches here. Let's do a couple more actually. Alright, so this is what you should have when you are finished the cast on. So the stitches are looking pretty even, you know, one If you have them and they're pretty stretched out, like you have a lot of space in between some of them, you just want to be careful and make sure you're getting nice even cast on so that the next row of stitching also comes out really even. But that's it for the cast on. So I did do a bit of a long tail. Sometimes I just like to leave it long to weave in the ends. It's totally up to you. Just pull. You just always want to make sure you pull enough that you have enough. So you can see here on this side of the cast on, it's making like little kind of almost a V pattern, and this side we have like these little bars pulled across the front. So for knitting there are two stitches, the purl stitch and the knit stitch. I'm going to start with the purl stitch and then we will go into the knit stitch. Again, for this method of knitting, they're very, very similar. So for the purl stitch, you're working with your yarn in front. And that's pretty much the only difference. So first thing you need to do is take your yarn. To maintain my yarn tension, I like to take it over my 3 fingers like this. Just grab it in my 3 fingers and then I wrap it. And then I kind of close down my index finger on that and then flip over. So take it and then I wrap it, close my index finger and turn over. So this is how this index finger is going to have the yarn here and be able to help me, whereas the rest of my hand will be maintaining the tension for this. So to do the purl stitch, you're going to take your knitting needle in your right hand and kind of hold this yarn. I kind of like to hold this yarn up here. So you're going to take your knitting needle in your right hand and you're going to insert from right to left into the front of the stitch. Just see. So you're going to just get a better view here, sorry. So we're taking it, insert from right to left, just through the front of the stitch. Then I like to kind of elevate this finger, hold the stitch, and you're going to come over this yarn and pull it through onto the new needle. Just like that. And that is your purl stitch. Just make sure it doesn't get too loose on the edge here. See a little bit better down here. So right side of the needle, the index finger on the left hand kind of is like maneuvering this yarn. I'm going to come over this yarn, pull it through, pass it off to the next needle. Insert the right side of the stitch, grab that yarn and pull it through, off onto the next needle. So it's really very simple. It's just one motion with a little bit of help from each hand is what makes it really easy. So right to left, grab this yarn, use the needle to pull it through. And these are the purl stitches. Right to left, grab the yarn, pull it through. Okay. So you can see the two hands work together. So it's important to make sure you're holding this yarn up with your index finger because as you can see it does help to maneuver it back and forth. See, I use this and kind of drawing the yarn over in front of the stitch so that I can use the other needle to pull it through the stitch. And this just kind of eliminates the whole wrapping the yarn because you don't have to separate your hands from the needles because this finger here is doing that wrapping of the stitch for you. Alright, so we're at the end of the row here, so we can set this needle down, and you can see here our purl stitches are starting to form. It is a bit loose here on the end of mine, so just make sure you're mindful of that and tighten it properly on either side. So you can see, you can kind of see here, these are the purl stitches, and the purl stitches, you can identify them because they have the bar that goes horizontally across the stitch in the front. So when you make purl stitches, the wrong side is going to be knit stitches, and the same for knit stitches. So on the back side of a knit stitch, you're going to get a purl stitch. So if we turn our work over, you can see we have knit stitches. And this stitch is actually called stockinette stitch. On one side it is knits and the other side it is purls. So when we turn over we have our knits. So I'm going to show you guys how to do the knit stitch now. Okay, so it's the same as the purl stitch, only worked on the back side. So I'm going to take my yarn here, grab it so I have my tension again, and I'm holding the yarn this time on the back side. And I'm going to take my needle in my right hand, put it from right to left into that stitch through the back. So you can see here, take this needle, push it right to left and on the back side. So I'm like this, coming through on the back side. Okay, and we're going to do the same thing we were doing for purl stitches, but on the back side. So I'm coming through, hold the stitch with my index finger, grab the yarn and pull it through. Pass it off. Okay, right to left through the back, index finger up to hold this yarn, grab it with the needle, pull it through the stitch here. Right to left, coming up the back, take this yarn over the needle, come through the loop, pull out, and pass off. Through, it really does help if you're using your tips of your index fingers to hold the stitches as you work them. So come through here, I kind of hold these stitches on my right needle with my index finger here, and then I can hold them with my thumb or my index finger on my left hand as well. Oops. Go right to left, coming out the back, grabbing and turning. Maybe see this a little better from this side. I'll try showing you guys from the back side. So coming right to left out there, grabbing the yarn and pulling it through the stitch. So it is really easy once you get the hang of it, and believe me, it works up really, really quick. Alright, and those are the 2 stitches. So you can see here the knit stitch is creating these little V's, and it almost looks like a braided pattern. And then on the wrong side we have the purls. The purl stitches with the bars in front. So I'm going to go ahead and just quickly do another row of each. So when we turn back to the purl side, we have the yarn here in front. So we're going to be working the stitches in front again. So yarn through right to left, help this guy maneuver over, oops, pull it through and pass it off. Right to left, over, grab the yarn, pop it off. right to left through the stitch, help the yarn pass over with that index finger, pull the loop through and pass it over. There's another row of the pearls. There. Oops, I did something funky down here. And then we'll do another row of the knit. So if you want to see from the front, we entered the back, right to left, grab the yarn, pull through. So it's the same as the purl stitch, just working through the back side and pulling that yarn through. The nice thing about this method of knitting is that you're always working from the same side. So you always work into the stitch from right to left. There's no need to cross over or do anything like that. So nice and easy, and then your stitches will work up and start to look like that. I don't know how well you can see this, it's a bit out of focus, but yeah. So this is the knit stitch on this side, turn over, and you have the purl stitch looking like that. And that's it, that's all there is to it. Alright, so I just continued knitting on in that same pattern, so you can see how they work up a little bit better. Purls on this side and knits are on this side. So when you get to the end of your project, you're going to cast off. So cast off works the same for knit stitches or purl stitches. You just have to work in the appropriate stitch. So I'm going to cast off on the purl side. Since we started on the purl side, it doesn't matter really what side you cast off on, just whenever your project is done. So to cast off, I'm going to purl 2 stitches. And if you were doing knits, you would just knit 2 stitches. And I'm going to take the stitch in behind and pull it over the stitch in front, just like that. And then I'm going to purl the next stitch and put the stitch in behind over top of that stitch, and then purl the next stitch and pull this stitch in behind over that other stitch. So we're just going to do this all the way down until we run out of stitches. And the reason we purl 2 in the beginning is just so we have that extra one to pull over the first stitch. But it's the same all the way down. Just purl and pull over the stitch in front using the back stitch. Alright, so at the final stitch we pull it over, and then we have one more stitch here. And we're just going to cut the yarn whenever we finish, and then you would pull through to tighten it like that, and then you would weave in your end. So you're just going to sew your tail throughout your project, and that is how that is going to stay nice and secure, and just give it a good tug and then it would be good. So that is how you pass it off. You can see it gives a nice clean finish on top, and on the back the stitches have basically continued as a purl stitch for that last row. But yeah, so yeah, that is the method of knitting that I use. Really easy, really fast. Let me know what you guys think if you try it out. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye!